My name's Tom Llamas. I work for NBC News, and I'm so honored to be here at South by Southwest. We have a really incredible conversation coming up about a really important show. I binged it over the last 3 days. I don't think there's anything on television quite like this. It is so authentic. It is so real. It's powerful. It's funny. It's emotional. And we're going to talk all about it in just a moment. I do want to bring up to the stage one of our first panelists. He's the host of this show. Some of you may know his name. Some of you may not, but most of you probably do. His work in film, theater, and television covers a variety of genres. He's literally done it all. His most recent film, The Menu, has gotten rave reviews. He's also going to star in Amazon's upcoming series, The Power, alongside Toni Collette. His directorial debut, Critical Thinking, was selected to premiere here at South by Southwest. He's won an Emmy Award, a Drama Desk Award, as well as nominations for Tony Awards and Golden Globes on top of that. He also received a special Tony Award in 2018 for Latin History for Morons, which was incredible, his most recent one-man show. And then let's talk about the movies, right? Carlito's Way, To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, Romeo and Juliet, Moulin Rouge, Summer of Sam, Encanto, The Ice Age, It Never Stops. He does it all. But the thing that he does that really makes me happy, that makes me just, I don't know, puts me in like the right mood, is when he dances.
You know, I love music too much. You put a beat on, I have to dance. He knew that. Why'd you do that to me?
You know I did that because the first time I ever heard of John Leguizamo, this was going way back, was House of Buggin'. And it was kind of like a sketch comedy show, but it was of Latinos. We had never seen anything like it. I grew up in Miami. But the coolest thing was that John would come out like sort of popping and locking and breakdancing.
Oh my God, I could
he
dance
would dance
back
when they
then.
didn't have sketches. He just dance and we'd watch. It was great. John,
And it would have been a hit back then if there had been Latino Nielsen houses. But we
they
did
didn't
not
have
have, they had maybe one Latin family on Nielsen's. Who would have thought that you weren't represented? And black families weren't represented either back in that day.
we're going to talk about all of that. Our next guest, I want to bring her to the stage. Her work has appeared on MSNBC, VH1, A&E, Discovery, History Channel, Netflix, Amazon, Apple Plus, HBO Max. Some of her biggest projects include Jennifer Lopez's Halftime, which was an amazing documentary, Mark Wahlberg's Wall Street, the doc, The Day I Met El Chapo and Los Jets, Jennifer Lopez, I mentioned that one, and the podcast Fatal Voyage. Let's welcome to the stage Carolina Saavedra, the executive producer of the show.
Yes. Yeah.
Carolina, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And the director of the show, I don't know if you live in a neighborhood, but some neighborhoods in Miami, there's like little houses, right? And then you got a McMansion in the middle of the neighborhood, and you're like, why does this exist? Well, part of the reason why that exists because of our next guy, because he helped create the show Cribs. And that was his first claim to fame, so now everybody in America wants a crib. He also worked on Raul Julia's The World's a Stage, which is an amazing film. Also American Masters, Lights, Camera, Action, Essential Heroes, Momento Latino. He also executive produced, which was executive produced and hosted by Eva Longoria, as well as the hit multicam sitcom Bunked, which my kids love. I want to welcome director Ben DeJesus. Ben, please come to the stage.
Ben.
Ben, welcome.
Thank you.
You got a big fan out there.
Yeah, somebody. It must be like mom or dad.
I got a couple.
Just one.
It's a deal. Okay, guys, first, before we talk about the show, before I even give like the spiel about what the show is, I want you guys to tell me briefly about your origin story, your family story, where your roots come from.
Oh, wow. Okay, like a Wikipedia version of my life. Well, I came to the United States when I was 3 years old, to Queens, Jackson Heights. 2 people, yeah. Made all the way to Austin, fantastic. You know, it was a difficult neighborhood. There was a lot of white flight. I got beat up a lot, but it made me really strong. And comedy became my way of survival, and it became sort of my ticket to Hollywood. And realized that Hollywood wasn't really for me, so because they weren't giving me the opportunity. So I started writing my own material and creating my own projects. And luckily, you know, America was ready for it, and my one-man shows helped me create, you know, Broadway shows and change the way America sees Latin people.
All right. Carolina?
I came to this country when I was close to 8. I come from Chile, and we essentially had to leave our country because my father was blacklisted. during the Pinochet era. So we came to the United States where my father studied to get his doctorate at the University of Iowa. So I'm a little bit from everywhere because I'm from Iowa. Then I moved to the East Coast, then worked in Manhattan, and I got into news because of my life story. For me, it was always important to tell stories and to tell the reality of what our stories are. And I actually started my career at MSNBC. So this is a full circle moment for me, which is super exciting, and I'm super proud of that. So yeah, and then I've been working in the industry for about, I don't want to age myself because he's always trying to find out my age, but for a long time.
Awesome. Yeah. So I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey. I'm Puerto Rican, and all right, Boricua, wepa. So I grew up as a theater kid. I was really into Broadway and wanted to make that my career, et cetera. And I grew up idolizing Raul Julia and this guy right here, John Leguizamo. So this is a full circle moment for me too. So very, very proud and honored.
Well, as the son of Cuban refugees who grew up in Miami, it's an honor to be here with all three of you because I think what you're doing is truly trailblazing. And I want to jump right into it. So the show is called Leguizamo Does America. And here's the official release. It's a 6-part series produced by NBC News Studios and premiering on MSNBC April 16th, so put it on your calendars. The series follows John across the country to celebrate Latino history, culture, and communities. Okay, that's the official thing you'll see on the TV guide, if it even exists anymore. To me, this is what the show is. And you tell me if I'm wrong. You look at America like a piñata, right? And like sometimes a piñata, like a good one, like you hit it and the stuff falls, but like sometimes the ones that were like a little cheaper, like your dad had to go and shake it and it all falls out. And I think the show is that. The show is America's the piñata, right? And then John, you're shaking this thing and all these Latino treasures are falling out.
Yeah.
And it's like people didn't even know what to expect. It's a surprise. So I think it's really phenomenal what you guys have done. Talk to me about the idea, the concept, and take it
Well,
from
thank
there.
you. That was a beautiful setup for it. This is the first of its kind, this show, which is crazy to imagine because we Latin people are the oldest ethnic group in America, the largest ethnic group, and there's never been an English language show about our culture. So that's thank you. So what this show is about Latin exceptionalism and what we've survived in this country, the things that it proves that being Latin is a superpower because our wealth has been stolen. We've been deported. We're the only group that's been deported. 2 million Latin people were deported in 1930 by Herbert Hoover, who were American citizens because of the Depression. Then they came at us at the Wetback Act in the 1950s, deported more American citizens. And we keep coming back and we keep rebuilding. And we had $2.8 trillion to the U.S. economy. If we were our own nation economy, we'd be the 5th largest economy in the world. And we get not much for it. We don't get our money's worth. And so this show shows our struggles, our pain, our joy, our dance, our music, our culture, artists, painters, dancers, activists, politicians, and we go into a deep dive. And I couldn't do it without these two great talents here who helped orchestrate it, build it, shape it, and make it happen.
Oh, thank you, John. Huge honor.
Yeah. Carolina and Ben, can you talk to me about the pitch? NBC Films, MSNBC, they took the pitch, they invested in this, but talk to me about the process because part of the show explores how hard it is to make truly authentic Latino entertainment.
Sure. Well, I've been working with John for about 13 years as partners on a bunch of projects. We have a company called NGL Collective. So I had spent some years with John on the road making some documentaries for PBS, kind of showing his process. Because again, I grew up really admiring and idolizing John, and I was able to go into the room and see how he makes it happen. So when he was doing Latin History for Morons, the inspiration struck, which was like, this is a comedy show. People are really being enlightened by learning these stories that they didn't know about, our incredible contributions to the fabric of this country. And so over a bunch of conversations, we had talked about doing something where John would travel to different historical sites where he would kind of experience it and tell people about it at the places where it happened. And it evolved over time, and it became something that was more fun and a little bit like John on the go. And one thing that you realize about John, he has this infectious curiosity and love for people that is incredible, like nobody else I've ever met. So to capture that and to be on this journey with him was something that MSNBC was really excited about and so we took the show on the road, and they took it, and here we are.
If I could give a shout out back to Ben, I mean, I couldn't have done this show without anybody but Ben directing it. I mean, he had 4 cameras on me, some of the best camera operators, all Latinx crew that Caro helped build and put together. And he would just, his infectious love of Latin culture, of our stories, of our people, of our pain. And he just goes in there and fearlessly and tirelessly helped me, put this on film.
In the movie The Menu, we were talking about this backstage. There's this funny scene.
Why?
Where I told you I was going to ask you. So there's a scene that John has where he plays a famous but I guess sort of washed up actor. Is that fair in The Menu?
He's a washed up actor who has a presentational show like this one. So it was a moment when I was in The Menu going to the other actors. This is a meta moment. Is my career over? Please tell me it's not.
Yeah, it's incredibly ironic because the joke is, take an actor, famous actor, send him to Italy, have him eat a pizza, have him eat some pasta, and it's a travel show on any network.
But your career's over.
Yeah, but
that's why you're doing that, because you're not viable. But no, this is not.
But that's the ironic part, right, John? Because that's not what this show is.
No,
you could have done that.
True.
You could have done that.
No, I wouldn't have done that.
But you could have, but you didn't.
I
you did something completely different.
Yeah. No, I would never do a light show like that. I need to do a show that's about, what I've brought to American comedy and American story writing is to mix comedy with pain. Yeah. Because that's the way my experience and Latin experience was. And I brought it into Mambo Mouth, Spicorama, and I will always blend it, like comedy with serious pain.
Because, Carolina, the show does have food and travel, but it's really about history and culture. In fact, I think it's a masterclass on Latino history and culture. You come out of it educated. And the difference between those travel shows, it's an escapism, it's a departure. Whereas this, you feel empowered.
Yeah, and I feel like that was something that was right from the start when I met John and talked to Ben. That was something that we felt really needed to be brought into the show. And you can only do that with, historical context so that people really understand where this stuff comes from, why we're here, what happened. Like, for instance, a great example is we're talking to Chuy Garcia, right? Representative Chuy Garcia in Chicago. And he starts to tell us about his family. And it's not just a fluff piece about Chuy and his platform, but it's really about where he comes from, his struggle for representation in this city that he loves. And he starts to tell us a story about his family, and his family, came with the Bracero program, and then and so he tells us the history. He doesn't go into the history of that, so then it's incumbent on us to kind of fill in the blanks and to tell people, let us kind of take you out of this scene for a minute and break down what this is for you, so that you understand where he's coming from and what he's talking about. And then we go back into the scene, which I thought were elements to our show that were hugely important.
Ben, one of the things that has been a problem for Latinos in the entertainment industry is that anytime we get a TV show made, we get a film made, it gets watered down, it gets put through a filter. By the time you taste it, it no longer tastes like coffee, it tastes like brown water, right? This show is literally authentic. I'm from Miami, 305, live and die. I learned stuff about my own community that I didn't know, and I've spent years there, covering it, reporting on it. How did you guys make the show so authentic? Because you took some bold choices.
Well, we wanted to tell stories that were deeper than like a travel log. We wanted to really avoid this being like a show hosted by a celebrity. And I know John wouldn't go for that, and we didn't want to kind of settle for that. So really we leaned into what John's taste and his flavors and his curiosity would lead him on his own. And we really went for it, basically. So we went to the stories that when we would go to a city, we wouldn't necessarily go to the famous touristy or the one that people tell you should go to this restaurant because X, Y, Z. We were like, well, who's the next generation of that? What's the future version of that? And we applied that across actors and artists and activists and politicians. And I think I got to give credit to John, though, because John was willing to take that ride with us. We were on the road for 6 weeks in the middle of July and August. Everybody's roasting 110 degrees. John is always camera ready. I don't know how he does that, but never sweating. And I think it required full commitment from everybody on the team, but really John set the standard. And John was the first guy ready to work, never complains. He's the hardest worker I know. And there's no shortcuts to telling stories like this.
I want to talk about one of the moments that sort of jumped out at me that made me sort of realize this was something different. And yes, I work for NBC News, so it's part of the family, but I want to be very honest with you. I wouldn't be up here if I didn't think the show was great. And they asked me what I thought, and I was completely honest with them. But there was a moment where they're in Puerto Rico speaking to a reggaeton artist who is, in a very eloquent manner, sort of giving you the history of Puerto Rico, talking about Commonwealth versus being a colony and how Puerto Rico feels like being a colony. On top of that, she's trans, and she's one of the biggest artists that Bad Bunny has ever discovered. So I'm watching this going, whoa, this is breaking down so many barriers, because you have the machismo culture, and you've highlighted this trans reggaeton artist that is blowing up, and she's teaching you about the history of Puerto Rico. I mean, what was that like?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, I got to give tribute to Ben and Caro figuring out how to get the most interesting people, the people who are going to talk to me honestly. You know, people who are okay going to a deep dive about politics, their emotional state, and what's really going on. Who can come with me all the way to the places that I want to go. And so she would vet them to find those people. And Villano, she came at it. You know, she helped me, you know, figure myself out. You know, because colonialism, to me, is something that will always affect Latin culture. You know, it always affect how we see ourselves, our self-worth, and it all came from, you know, the Spaniards came here and basically decimated our culture, our religion, our language, and we're the only people in the world whose culture, religion, and language has been destroyed, and we're still here.
On that point, John, when you walk into the Telemundo Center in Miami, which NBC also is partners with Telemundo, we own Telemundo, there's a phrase that says, act like owners, not like renters. And that is like, when I read that, I was like, whoa, that's where it's at right there when you speak about sort of that perspective and that shadow you can't shake of being a colony. Carolina, you want to weigh in?
I just want to add one little thing about our stories and how we found them. I also have to give credit to my team, people that I hired that are super incredible artists in their own right. And together we found these stories and built them and obviously pitched them to John. And John was either into it or not. And also to the people at the network and the studio who did not limit us in terms of who we went after. I think like we need to acknowledge that.
That's what I'm saying about why it was so authentic. I had never seen anything like this. It was just so real.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like they understood what we wanted to do, and they supported us all the way. And then you get a team of people who are as enthusiastic about the subject matter. And all of us on this team, you know, we are so proud of who we are. We're so proud of our community, and there's so much talent out there. And we just kind of was the magic sauce. We got everybody together, and when you have the right support with the right people, magic happens. You know.
I mean, to back up what Cara was saying, it's true. I mean, I've done enough TV shows and worked with enough studios where the sort of sanitizing by committee, the whitewashing, it just happens. It starts to happen, you know, and the show becomes nothing what you planned it to be.
Or the flip side, they try to get all the Latino cultures into one sitcom, and it's like we're confused now. Who are we talking about?
What is that? Yeah. But MSNBC and NBC Studios and MSNBC Films, they gave us the freedom. They gave us the permission. They allowed us to be as raw as we wanted to be. So
you have an episode in Los Angeles, which I know is very close to your heart. We have a clip from your interview with Robert Rodriguez. Let's play that if we can, please.
Somebody with no money, no contacts, no crew. There was no crew. It was just me. I was doing everything with the camera.
And how long did it take you to shoot that?
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
So I tell people, you could change your whole life in 2 weeks if you apply yourself. You can look at your lack of situation as a negative. Oh, I don't have any money. I'm selling my body to science. I'm never going to get anywhere. There aren't any other Latins in the business. No one's even come out of Texas.
Right.
What chance do I have? You don't see it that way. You look at it the other way. Like, I'm gonna go make this. Maybe I can sell it and double my money. Maybe if I can't, at least I know I tried.
All in all, Robert has brought this town more than $1.5 billion from his films. And that's not even counting the TV shows he's produced.
People sometimes go to Hollywood and find that it's not for them, especially, you know, Latinos.
Right.
I never even bothered to go. I figured I didn't fit in there. Right. But because I made mariachi out of my apartment, when they bought it, I thought, maybe I can stay home where my inspiration and my family and everything is.
In 2000, Robert opened up Troublemaker Studios, a production company in his hometown of Austin, Texas.
Well, I found that was a big gift, was to be outside of the element. You just found you had ideas no one else was coming up with. Telling stories no one else is bothering to tell. And so it feels fresh.
Yeah,
it's original and it's ours because we're, no one's told these Latin stories yet. So it's been cool to create so many franchises, the Mariachi series, the Spy Kids series, the Machete series, just filmmakers don't usually create their own series of films that way. But because you were able to and you were away from the industry, I didn't need permission.
No, you need
That's
permission.
the thing. When you don't have to go hat in hand, ask somebody before you can make your dream happen, that's empowerment.
That's what happened to me. It was like I was trying to pitch stories to Hollywood, Latin movies, Latin stories, and nothing was getting done. So I went to theater, where there was the least point of resistance in my neighborhood, with my friends, my brother, who I would do all my one-man shows to, and then perform them in these tiny spaces where I had to ask nobody for permission, or I had to pass through a committee. I just wrote my stories, and boom, there they were.
Even for me, seeing that, it'd be like, Mambo Mouth. He just went and made his own show.
I mean, both you and I started not in the system, but outside of the system.
You were creating your own system.
Yeah, right, because there was no entryway into that system.
There's a real power and joy to that.
Nice. Oh, wow. Do you know that he's one of the great pioneers of independent film? Yes. And when he was talking about selling his body, he sold...
It was real.
Yeah, he was selling his blood and all kinds of...
For science research,
yeah,
to get
and he
money.
used that money to do his film. Yes, yes. El Mariachi.
Great film, which turned into Desperado, which the next point he made was he casted Desperado with a bunch of people that weren't superstars, and they've all blown up since then. John, you say something at the beginning of the Los Angeles episode. You say, welcome to Hollywood, or as I call it, Hollywooden. People may look at you, and I want to explain this because sometimes you have to tell people a couple times so they understand. People may look at you and say, you're John Leguizamo, man. You've done everything. What are you complaining about? But explain what it takes to become John Leguizamo, because you never stop fighting.
Well, I am a complainer, and I like to complain. Because if you can't be a New Yorker and not complain, because then we're going to take away your license.
He's good at it.
Yeah, no, complaining is important, man. We got to complain. Yeah, I mean, when I started out, I was at NYU with Andrew McCarthy and D.B. Sweeney, my acting class in NYU. I was an A student. And I thought I was a good actor like them, and then they're going to 5 auditions a day, and I'm going to 1 audition every 5 months for a drug dealer. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm paying the same tuition, I'm studying, I'm as good as they are. And the casting breakdown was like Jim Crow in the 80s. It was like white actor, white lawyer, white doctor, white everything. And then you would ask your agent, can you just tell them to see me? Let me do my monologue. Maybe I can change their mind. They won't even see me. You couldn't even be seen. So I knew that, wait a minute, I was an idealistic young man. I thought meritocracy was a real thing. I thought talent would rise to the top. And thank God I finally learned that it's not true, that it's not real and it doesn't exist. And that's when I started to get a reality check for myself and go, wow, it's never going to happen for me. I have to figure out my own way, because no matter how talented I am, no matter how well I write, no one's going to help me. So I started performing in tiny performance art spaces downtown. The last one at night at Gusto House, the last one at PS 122, because I was a Latin guy, so they didn't know what to do with me, so they would put me last, thinking, if everybody leaves, at least, there'll be somebody talking while they clean up. And I cleaned up. People stayed. They started laughing, and then they realized, white people wanted to see me. And then they put me a little earlier. Pretty soon I'm headlining. And then all of a sudden, Latin people are finding me. When they put me on HBO, Latin people found me. And we found each other. And then when I started doing Spicorama, I was selling out everywhere I toured. And then, De Niro and Madonna are coming down to see this Latin guy tell his Latin stories about his Latin shit. and they loved it, And that's when I realized there's an audience out there, Latin audience, hungry to see themselves, and a white audience that loves great Latin storytelling, and black audience and an Asian story that will see me. And that gave me the power and continues to power me.
And you were saying when you were auditioning in those early days, people were just blatantly racist with you. They said nobody wants to watch Latinos succeeding. Nobody wants to watch a Latino hero.
Well, executives, when I would pitch them stories, they go, that's great. And I go, but we need more Latin stories. He goes, well, to tell you the truth, John, Latin people don't want to see Latin people. And I was like, what? Really? We don't want to see ourselves? God, I don't feel that inside. And they would tell me things like, you know, I'm pitching like a real feel-good movie. Well, Latinos don't want to see feel-good movies. Really? We just want to see depressing, dramatic bullshit? Yeah, I love that stuff too, but... And then they would tell me to my face, they would tell me their inner thoughts by accident. They would tell me that, you know, we don't need to go after Latin audience because we already got their money. So, but now, I mean, obviously execs are much more savvy. They won't say that to your face. They'll probably think it, but they won't say it. Because, I mean, there's a lot of great things being done for optics in the business right now that we're going after the people of color. We're giving everybody an opportunity. We want diversity, but what are they greenlighting? What are they greenlighting? What are they greenlighting?
Yes. I want to add, just thank God that John did not give up, because John, having traveled with him for so long, there's nobody in the Latin space that has changed and inspired an entire generation of creators, not just actors, but writers, directors, producers. And I really thank you, John, for sticking with it, because if you gave up, there's so many of us that wouldn't be here.
No,
I told him when I was growing up, we were looking for plays that had Latino roles, and that's how one of the first ways we heard that you even did Broadway was Mambo Mouth Freak, and it was like, whoa, and we totally connected with that, because in the library, even in Miami, full of plays, full of different dramatic works, it was hard to find Latino roles.
I mean, not to fangirl, but I have all his playbills because I went to see all his shows when I was, you know, living on the East Coast, and he's that guy he's our North Star in many ways, because unlike so many people who are in the limelight, who are afraid to say what they need, what they feel, and who are afraid to take it there and take the conversation where it really should be going, this is a man who's not. Right? And we need people like him. And yeah, we're all so grateful. None of us would be here without him.
No, exactly.
Because when I was doing it for kids who look like me. Mm-hmm. I wanted them to feel seen. Keep going.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I had this question later, but you opened the door. There's a trauma, man. There's a trauma, and you guys talk about this, and you have this crazy exchange in Washington, D.C. at that theater. I know it's incredibly emotional. I don't know if you can get through it. If you can, just if you could give the audience just a taste.
I'll do it for me.
Okay.
So we went to the Gala Theater, which is this theater that essentially provides a safe space for kids in D.C., mostly all are, whose parents are immigrants, and they themselves, some of them are, illegal, and they're really struggling with their experience of coming to this country, because there is a trauma. You're leaving your country, you're leaving everyone that you love, and you come to this country, and you're not instantly embraced. I mean, I think I wasn't, you're from Puerto Rico, you might have a slightly different experience, but I'm sure on some level, it's like ours, and I think, in that moment, John sat down with these kids and they started to tell him what the significance of this theater was for them and how it was providing them with a voice and an ability to not feel alone. And John was able to connect with them on so many levels based on his story. And it just became this really beautiful moment of recognition, I would say, of like, I am you and you are me, right? And we've all been through this. And I think that across our stories, that's what we always saw, is that like we see each other, and when we look at each other, we know your story to some degree, right? There's this recognition, and I think he went through a really emotional moment at that point.
Ben, we tell a lot of stories, and there are moments though, as a reporter, as a photographer, as a director, even though you're behind the lens and you're hearing a story, it just touches you, and you become human again. You don't forget that humanity. What was that moment like to kind of see that footage, to be there and experience that moment?
It was very special, and I knew it was magic as it was happening, and not just for the cameras, for the kids and for John to have that moment, even if it wasn't shot, was something really incredible and meaningful. And I think that's, again, just testament to John's commitment for opening doors for so many of us. And this isn't about us excluding other people at the expense of us getting more. We want to be seen. We want our fair share. We want to participate. We want to share our stories and celebrate with you, and we want to celebrate your story. So I thought it was beautiful. It was one of the highlights of my career.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I just feel like we're 20% of the U.S. population, less than 1% of the protagonists on film, less than 1% of the executives, less than 1% of the stories being told. We're 30% of the U.S. box office, $4 billion we give to streaming. And we just, I mean, the representation is just nil. It's just not, it's not acceptable. It's not okay. And things have to change now. You know, I've been told, you know, give it time, but yo, I'm already 4 decades in. When is it gonna change? I can't keep waiting. My life's gonna be over. Things gotta change now, right now. We Latin people have to start getting a little more active. We got to start boycotting, protesting, picketing. Things have to change now.
Robert Rodriguez brings up a point in the LA episode in that interview where he says he wanted to stay in Austin and stay with his family because he wanted to tell stories about his family because nobody else was telling these stories. Nobody else had heard these stories, you know? Do you find that to be true, though? Is Hollywood now a little hungrier for unique Latino content, or do they still want the same tired drug dealer, border, cartel story?
No, I think executives and studios are really trying to change. They're trying, but you know, obviously, there's still the gatekeepers, the decision makers are still don't look like us. So they're still a little resistant, still, you know, I've been pitching stories for the last 4 years, period pieces about heroes, about great activists in the 1800s, Jovita Dar, this Latin woman in the late 1800s, early 1900s, who ran her own newspaper, who fought against lynching, because Latin people, 6,000 of us were lynched and burned and set on fire in the United States from 1830 to 1930. Jim Crow laws were also for Latin people. And she fought, and I wanted to make her story. She fought to save Latin children from being lynched. And no studio said, no, we don't do period pieces. We just don't do period pieces. I go, yeah, but I saw some period pieces. I saw a couple movies look like very period type stuff. I said, okay. So, you know, it's impossible, man. And there's a great story about Gil Bosquez. This Mexican ambassador saved 40,000 Jews in Vichy, France, in Nazi France. It took 20,000 and put them in one church and hid 20,000 in the other church, and then gave them asylum in Mexico. Saved 39,000 more Jews than Schindler. They won't do that story either because it's a Latin person and it's period. And there's millions of excuses that we can all attribute to whatever.
Just to piggyback on what John is saying, like the solution is within us, I think. I think we have more power than we give ourselves credit for. And so a lot of what we're doing now is just we got to give ourselves the green light. Like any documentary that I've ever done, I just did it. I started it without having any studio support it. I just said, I got a camera. My first doc was with John, and I showed up at a rehearsal with him and Fisher Stevens. And the first day I was there with my little DSLR camera, I said, wow, this is a documentary. So the next day I wrote a treatment and I brought it to Fish and John, and I was like, hey, I think this is a documentary. Could I come along? And John, to his credit, and Fish, they were like, sure, just come along. And I pretty much never stopped showing up. I don't know if John regrets that, but I won't stop showing up. But it's about taking matters into our own hands and making the stories that we want to tell. Like Hollywood has a short memory with certain things. Desi Arnaz helped create the entire Hollywood television industry himself. So it's been done before. So we're going to take a page from that, take a page from Tyler Perry and even from Blumhouse and A24. And I always say, like, why not us? We got to do it ourselves.
Great point. John, and I do want to be, you know, very blunt about this. The show it's not a show about protest. It's a show about celebrating the culture. And it's a show that you feel, like I said, empowered and you feel excited and you want to learn more. You want more after you see this.
Because we're clever.
Yeah, you're good.
We got to seduce. You got to seduce. You know, when I did Latin History for Morons, I knew nobody wanted to hear about Latin history, not even Latin people.
That's my question, though.
Yeah.
Why is this sort of something that you have never stopped doing? You want to keep educating Americans about Latinos, and so the question is
and
why?
Latin people. I'm educating Latin people.
Yeah.
Didn't
No,
know,
it's true.
We don't know our own history. I didn't know any of the stuff that I was putting in Latin History Morons, and when I saw it, it was mind-blowing to understand that with the most decorated war, the most awarded soldiers in every battle that America's ever had. We fought 10,000 known Latino patriots fought in American Revolution. 20,000 of us fought in the Civil War. 120,000 of us fought in World War I. 500,000 of us fought in World War II. But you never see a movie about us. There was no Latin Band of Brothers. Where was he? You know, Discovery Channel. Where's those stories? I mean, it's crazy. So yeah, I figured the only way to get everyone to hear the things that I want to hear was through humor. And in this one, it's with food, music, dance, some comedy. That's how we suck everybody in.
Catalina, tell me about some funny moments shooting with John. It's got to be a trip, and going, you know, to Puerto Rico and all these different cities.
Honestly, shooting with John and all of my experience, and I say this, and it's like, I feel like you probably think I'm just trying to blow smoke up your, you know, but it's the truth. He is such a joy to be around on a day-to-day basis. He's kind and to your point, curious about everything and everyone. So everyone on set, whether you were behind the camera or a guest, you know, they felt truly engaged with this incredible human being, superstar, and he makes you feel, and everyone feel like they're worthy. And yeah, there's tons of humor, especially, and I will say, a lot of it comes from these two, who basically spend the entire day just making fun of each other. And so, and then everybody got it.
It's a technique. My directing style with John.
But every day was hilarious. Every day there was, you know, comedy that came into play for sure, and it definitely broke some more serious moments. That was always welcome, and it kept things light. But yeah, I mean, with John, you can't get away from it.
Wait, Ben, did I hear like a John impersonation? Do you do like a John? Can we get a little bit of that? Can we?
I don't think so.
No. There's not an impersonation.
There's nothing to imitate. I don't have an accent.
He's my personal bully. That's my personal bully.
The debate between who speaks Spanish better is a never-ending debate. So.
Porque yo hablo el español mucho mejor que Ben. Ben, él tiene un acento gringo.
Mentira.
Él hablar así cuando puede hablar español.
Mentira.
Venir, que poner, querer gente.
See what you did, Caro? You got him started.
Sorry.
Talk to me about those tacos with George Lopez, because the tacos looked a little spicy. Could this guy handle it? Because it looked like you were a little nervous with the tacos.
Those tacos were dope. I mean, they were the food truck. Who invented that? Land people did. So they brought us to a food truck, El Pastor.
El Pastor.
Yeah, and then, oh my God, it was so dope, and it was delicious, and it was crazy hot, but I have to interview my homie George Lopez. I didn't want to be like, hi, George.
And the whole thing was like, you have to have the hot sauce or you're not Latino. So they start like hammering this guy's tacos, and he's like sweating.
Who's
already.
more Latino? Yeah.
And the taco truck owner got in on the joke when he couldn't handle it. He's like, your white side is showing. And it was just like hilarious. I mean, there's always levity. Let's just say it that way, right?
What did you guys learn? Talk to me about an episode and something you learned. Like I said, I learned so much through the 6 episodes, but what did you guys learn?
I mean, I'll start with Puerto Rico. For me, that episode, going and talking to the Taino people, was one of the most mind-blowing experiences that I feel I've ever had as a producer and as a person.
The indigenous population of the Caribbean.
The indigenous population of Puerto Rico. And so to hear their stories and for them to tell us, you know, we are not dead. We're here. We're live, living, and we're trying.
Because of my bad, but for a purpose. In Land History of Morons, I said that there was a Caribbean Holocaust and that all the Native American people, the Tainos and Arawaks, were all extinct. And so they took me to Caguas, the center of Puerto Rico, and Caguana, and these indigenous people said, you did us an offense by saying that we don't exist because now they can take our lands from us. And, you know, they castigated me on film, and I was happy to be proved wrong, because I don't want to do any harm to anyone.
But it wasn't, I mean, castigate feels so, with this kind of negative energy.
Me.
But it was a very kind exchange of like, we just wanted to let you know that that's not the truth. And John being, you know, a student of life, I think, you know, he's open to hearing what the reality of the story is. And they just had this beautiful exchange between all of them. And for me, just to hear, to have them talk about what it is that is going to ultimately determine who we are as people, and about the danger in telling them that they don't have Taino roots because they are going to take their land, they're going to privatize everything in Puerto Rico. You know, to have them be so open about that, to me, was like a huge learning experience.
Ben?
Yeah, it was amazing. I would say for me, like just seeing the reverence that other superstars and actors and other performers was really eye-opening. What they have for John, like to see George Lopez in the trailer. I hope he doesn't mind that I'm saying this, but like to see him a little nervous and excited to meet John in a different way. And Robert Rodriguez got on a plane that morning to shoot for 2 hours with us. Got on a plane that afternoon to go back and finish his movie. Like, to see the reverence and the respect that other giants in the industry hold for John, that I'm not even sure John understands that in the moment, but I certainly was amazed by that. And then the segment that Carolina's talking about in Puerto Rico was really eye-opening because we went to places that I lived when I was a baby. We went to Ponce, and then the town where the indigenous Tainos are at is actually the birthplace of my mother, where she grew up, and she knew John before she passed, and she predicted a lot of these beautiful things happening to me now. So to have that moment and share it with John and the team and be surrounded by love was really beautiful.
Yeah, that moment in specific, I remember being on comms with Ben, and the scene was wrapping, and I just hear a little bit of a sniffle. And I called out to Ben, and I was like, "Are you okay?" And it was just that moment, really, the whole crew, I mean, it was just all hugs and love after that, because it was just such an emotional moment.
Life-changing experience overall.
For sure.
John, what about you? You hosted all the 6 episodes?
I love the Michael Pena one when because I love Mike, and I've done a lot of films and TV shows with him. And when he was really young, he was always such a spitfire, so brilliant, and he always made me laugh. Anyway, he goes back to the hood in Chicago where he grew up with. He goes back, makes pilgrimages, goes to all the places he grew up in, and he's not afraid, and he wants to give back. And then he invited me to his family's barbecue in their yard. And you know, it's a tough neighborhood. It was a hood. You know, they told us we had to be out by, you know, sunset. And
Oh, no, that's a different neighborhood.
oh, that was a different neighborhood?
Different neighborhood. You're getting Chicago. That's Gage Park. When we were in Gage Park shooting with the students.
Oh, that's where we had to be out by
Yes,
midnight.
but you know,
By 6.
but we did meet up with him in a rough neighborhood.
Yes,
And
we
yes,
did.
we couldn't really walk around there too long. You're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
no, we would put ourselves in harm's way, but
We
so,
don't-
like,
never mind.
In
No,
New
that didn't
York,
happen.
in New
That
York,
didn't
they said Johnny. You said a guy named Johnny jacked your bike. Now you're John Leguizamo. Do you still get jacked or no? Like, you got some street cred now a little bit.
no, I've gotten jacked. They just didn't realize it was my bike. But my bike's been stolen many, many times in New York City. Now I have the crappiest bike, and it'll probably get stolen anyway. Yeah. Yeah, I got mugged when I was 7 years old. Is that what you're talking about, Dad?
Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, my parents were immigrant parents, and they would make me earn my Christmas presents, which is so I had to read the encyclopedia to try to get my Christmas presents. So I read the goddamn A's, and they got me my bike, and then I'm riding it down the street, and this Johnny guy comes and beats me up and takes the bike from me, and I'm crying, and I come up to my dad, go, "Dad, they beat me up." I go, "No, you go back down there. Don't come in here until you beat him up." I go, "But he beat me up. Now you're yelling at me." It was like, there was no winning.
John, so like I said, I learned a lot, and we're gonna get to these audience questions, but I will never be able to look at an avocado again the same way. Talk to me about what you tell the audience in the camera when you're in the bodega about the avocado.
Well, avocados come from, you know, the Aztecs and the Maya, and the word aguacate in Aztec and Nahuatl, it means testicles, because if you know when you cut it in half, it looks just like the
Never again, bro.
section of a testicle. Yeah, right. You
Used to love avocado. Used to love guacamole. Not even look at that. Okay, anything. All right, let's talk. We got some questions that have been submitted. We also have likes on the questions, so the more people like the questions, we'll ask them. We're going to start with Victoria Azuston. Is that you? Wait, what's that? Oh.
Austin with a Z.
Oh, okay.
Austin.
Oh, that's what you pronounce it. Wait, do you want to ask it? Is that you? Okay, go for it. You can ask it. Wait, or do I? I don't know what is the. Okay, go for it. What's that?
I think you have to read out
You want me to read it? Okay, sorry, you want me to read it. There's like a lot of rules here. Okay. The success of Encanto shows how people want to see Latin culture in our entertainment industry. How important was it for you to be part of that cast? But I do want to ask you something else. I brought this up. To me, watching Encanto with my kids, it was a huge success.
Yes.
The thing I didn't understand, actually I do understand it, was how did Disney not push that out like they pushed Frozen out?
Right.
I mean, this was a masterpiece. So take it from there.
Okay, all right, there's two questions in one. Yeah, I mean, the power of Encanto and the success of Encanto was what we've always known. You have to have Latin consultants, you have to have Latin artists be part of the creative process. So you had a Latina director, a Latina writer, the whole cast was Latino. They went to Colombia, they did research, you know, very specific. So here you are addressing a Latin story, but very specifically, maybe, you know, and about Colombians and about La Guerrillera, it's sort of hidden in there, but very specific. And that's the success of it, because it wasn't generic, it wasn't
Authentic.
general, it was authentic. And everybody feels that, and it becomes a universal story. And all Latin people relate to all Latin stories. We really do, if they're well told. You know, it doesn't matter what country you're from. I'm still going to groove on Mexican storytelling, Cuban storytelling, Puerto Rican, if it's because I see myself in it. What was your part of the question?
It was strange. It was such a success, but it was almost organic. It was sort of grassroots that like it bubbled up.
They didn't know what they
Yeah.
had. They didn't know what they had.
Well,
It
yeah, but
happens a
they're
lot
paid
in
to know what they
Hollywood.
have.
What?
But that's kind of their job, though, isn't it?
But, you know, it was a Latin story. It was very specific, and they didn't know that was going to become the biggest hit they've ever had. But it did. It was the biggest hit
Awesome.
that they've ever, the biggest musical, the number one. It beat Frozen. You know,
Yeah.
they didn't know.
Okay.
They didn't know because
They
it was a
didn't know.
Latin story, and
Right.
they still don't know. Even though with every hit, they still don't know that Lin-Manuel has the biggest hit on Broadway. Where's the other Latin stories?
Right,
Where are
right.
they? There are none. We're invisible on Broadway.
It's a great point. We have a question from Carlos Parrada. Is he here? Okay, maybe not. How much do you feel your Colombian heritage is still part of how you think? All that magical realism. You were just talking about that.
All right. Well, obviously, my Colombian heritage has a lot to do with who I am and how I see, you know, how I express myself, my type of comedy. Colombians are very, you know, we like our one-man upsmanship. We like to do the dozens, and you know, we like a lot of sarcasm too. So that's part of it. Magical realism. You know, I grew up in the States, and I read Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and I see where magical realism really exists in Latin America, just because, I guess, of colonialism and conquest, Inquisition, and the destruction of the indigenous cultures that have created this magical realism to survive, and it's part of their survival storytelling. But it's not as much part of my life because I grew up in New York, and you can't be so whimsical in New York, you won't survive. You gotta be much more realistic, so I'm more realistical.
This is for Carolina and Ben. What locations did you travel to for your new show? And when in the country are where in the country are these stories coming from?
Well, we started in New York City. We started in John's hometown, actually. He took us right to where he grew up and where he lived in front of his apartment building. And he kind of told us his story. And then obviously we covered, in New York City, we tackled a lot of issues about marginalization. Then we went to DC, where we discuss representation, but we meet with different people from all ethnicities. It's not like one Latino story from, you know, this is the Colombia episode or this is the Mexico episode. They're kind of intermixed, depending on who it is that we're talking to. We also went down to Miami. Obviously, in Miami, we're talking about the Cuban population and the Venezuelan population. And then we went to Puerto Rico. Obviously, there it was very specific to Puerto Rico. Then we went to Chicago, and we met with not only the Mexican community there, but also the Puerto Rican community in Chicago, which is a little lesser known. And we ended up in LA, where we basically focused primarily on the industry of Hollywood, and which is something that's near and dear to John's heart and to obviously all of us who work within it. So it wasn't one specific culture. We kind of celebrate everyone. There's some cultures that we didn't get to touch base on. I mean, we couldn't hit every single country, but to your point earlier, when you do that, also there's like a disjointment, and so we just.
But wait, isn't there season 2?
Well.
Oh, we don't know yet.
We don't know yet.
Yes,
Maybe.
please.
Season,
Yeah, could be.
Season 3, season 4. Okay, we'll see. Ben, I have a question for you. Comes from Alicia Ramirez. What advice do you have for young Latinos who are trying to navigate the professional world while trying not to lose their heritage in white America?
I mean, the short answer is just go for it. Like, don't let yourself be locked in by fear or the statistics of how marginalized we are in the industry. Just go for it. And I think that, like John always says, like being Latino is a superpower. I really believe that. Anything that makes you different is an edge, not a hindrance. So I think own that difference as opposed to being afraid or trying to kind of assimilate. Keep your richness and your uniqueness for sure, but don't give up.
John, you kind of had sort of a guerrilla warfare mentality on how to break into Hollywood and the entertainment industry. You did it yourself, little things here and there that popped up, made a bigger splash. What do you recommend to Latino filmmakers now to get recognition from larger companies? How does somebody who's just starting out get on the radar of Comcast, get on the radar of Disney, get on the radar of Netflix?
Well, I mean, the digital revolution definitely democratized the ability to get your product done, because you can do it with your iPhone, you can do it however you can make it happen. And obviously, Latin content, the Nielsen's just came out with a Netflix breakdown that proves that Latin people on Netflix will go to Latin content more readily than to any other content. They will definitely go to content that has a Latin artist, Latin storytelling, Latin filmmakers in it. So that's a good thing. So I think Latin people are having success on the digital platform, where their content is being found by the audience that wants it. The problem that's happening is that the studios, no matter how many millions of hits these companies and these young artists on digital platforms are getting, are not going to them and greenlighting their projects or bringing them in. That's something that I've noticed, and that's very problematic, because they are doing it. If a white artist does have a lot of hits like that, they're going to them immediately and making them stars. They're not doing that to Latin stars on the digital platform. But I say, you got to make your own content. You got to make it, and you got to get it out there however you can. Obviously, for me, theater was easier because it's a very cheap format. Obviously, film is a very expensive format, so it's prohibitive that way. But, write plays. That's what I did. I wrote the cheapest thing that I could do, that I could get made in plays, was my thing to get me to where I needed to go.
There was a conversation you have in the New York episode where you're at a dinner table and you asked about the term Latinx. Yeah. There's been a lot of polling over Latinx. Latinos, I mean, to be fair, they don't even know what it is. They're not sure what it is. You use the term Latinx a lot throughout the entire series. Talk to me about sort of where that's at in your mind, what you think of it. Are you going to continue to use it?
I love Latinx because it doesn't exclude women. It's LGBTQ plus affirmative. I like it because it sounds like a Generation X, Latinx, like X-Men. It sounds like it's like a superhero. So I really like it. But I know a lot of people don't like it. Older people, Latin people hate it. I don't want to say that. It's Latinos. Just say Latino. Shut up.
Latinxes. It's kind of weird.
Que es un Latinx? Que es un ex? And millennials don't like it either. So, yeah,
we'll see what happens.
I'm going to still use it.
Carolina, let's see here. Latinidad is not a monolith. We come in different races, Afro-Latino. You guys talk about being from Europe, things like that.
Indigenous.
Indigenous. What were the difficulties in trying to draw a cohesive, nuanced pick? And I do want to say you guys have done, I think, one of the best sort of surveys of everybody. You feel it's very inclusive.
Yeah, no, for sure. In terms of in front of the camera or behind the camera?
I think this was in the stories you guys tell on the show.
Yeah, I mean, look, in terms of the stories that we tell, there was for me, there was not a specific story that I wouldn't want to tell. For me, it's like the interesting story that can get us to a layered story. That's the story that we want to tell. So, for instance, it doesn't have to be my background. It doesn't have to be what I lived, what my knowledge it comes from, but it's about telling the full story. So that was the number one rule, right? We want to tell the full story. We want to tell everyone's story. So to me, that's kind of like an easy thing, to be inclusive of other people. It comes naturally to me. I think when you're a person that's been left out for so long, the idea of bringing other people in is just your natural reaction. It's the thing that you always want to do. So finding those stories and determining what those were going to be, there was no hardship in that. And there was not a single story that was like not going to be considered just because of like we had a specific idea of what it is that we wanted to do. For us, it was more about the overall theme. And then we found stories to tell that, you know?
Ben, what influences for you when you shoot these documentaries and you shoot these series? I mean, is there a filmmaker or a past series that has influenced you in a big way?
Yeah, I mean, I look up to all the greats. I look up to Robert Rodriguez. I look up to people like Ken Burns in many ways, although his stories have often left some of our stories out of it. But I'm inspired by it anyway. Joe Berlinger, Guggenheim, Fisher Stevens. So I'm into a lot of things, but I'm really still like a theater kid at heart. So I'm still drawn to movie musicals. I'm still drawn to Broadway shows. I'm still drawn to John's work. And it's like a whole diaspora of influences for me.
John, who are your biggest influences and to this day, who still influences you?
Oh, I got different influences for the different things I do. You know, like for one-man shows, I came up at a time when there were such great, powerful one-man shows. There was Eric Bogosian, who brought the anger to it, and Whoopi Goldberg, who brought, you know, ghetto and urban and just poetry to it, and then Lily Tomlin, who brought sort of the play to it. So I took it and I made it my own thing, sort of an autobiographical play of it. So those were huge influences for me. And then obviously acting, Pacino, De Niro, you know, Brando, they were like, you know, they were who existed. And I think Richard Pryor, to me, though, was the biggest influence in my whole life and career, because here was this marginalized black man telling a marginalized story, but making it so funny and bringing the rawness to it. And so he's my biggest influence.
But you know, a lot of your later works and now this show, I mean, you're a journalist.
Right.
In a sense, you got to get the facts right. You got to get those stories right. Yeah. So how does that sort of? You've obviously evolved as a communicator and you've grown as a communicator. I mean, how do you make sure you're getting all that right and making sure you're not making mistakes?
Right. I mean, obviously this is not the field that I had prepared myself for. You know, it's definitely your field. So it's a little harder for me sometimes. But you know, I try to be like, I think I look at Ken Burns, I look at Oliver Stone, and I look what they've done, and I try to learn from them. You know, I try to learn. I try to do the best I can.
As we get close to wrapping this up, some final thoughts, John. If you were going to talk to somebody in an elevator who has no interest in Latino culture,
right,
how do you sell them on this show?
Well, I mean, because the show, if you watch the show, I want people to feel like they want to be Latin, that they're sorry that they're not Latin. That's what I'd like to do. And if somebody's trapped in an elevator, you know, and they don't have no interest in Latin culture, I don't know why I'm talking to them, but please like us.
Carolina, what message do you have to Latino filmmakers, showrunners out there? You had a lot of success. I know you've worked very hard. What's your advice to them?
My main advice would be to have a very specific point of view and to honor that point of view throughout your career. I think a lot of people get lost in the sauce and they just they're hungry for work, right? So they'll do just about anything. And I get that. And I've been there and done that as well. But I think if you have to honor who you are and the stories that you want to tell, and I think that's, for me, the only thing that I'm always looking at is, am I telling the stories I want to be telling? And often I'm not. I haven't been able to. And then lo and behold, something like this happens and you're at the right time, the right place with the right people, and a dream comes true, you know?
And then finally, Ben, we've talked a lot about doors slamming in our faces, breaking down the doors. NBC News, MSNBC Films opened the door. They've opened the door for me. They've opened the door for you guys. Talk to me about that.
I think it's incredible. I think it gives us a stamp of credibility and approval that I think we've deserved for a long time, but it does help across the marketplace, and it opens doors to other people. Like, you can't, when you have a bit of success or you get to a certain level in your career and your journey, and I'm certainly not where I envision myself to be in the future, but you have a responsibility to pay it forward. And I think MSNBC is paying it forward in many ways, but also as individual storytellers, we got to pay it forward with the stories we tell, the people we bring along to make it happen, and the audiences we're trying to move.
We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Cesar Conde, the chairman of NBC, who is a Latin man who's given us this opportunity. His mission statement was 50% diversity, and it's true. He greenlit this show. Liz and Amanda, without their help, we need our allies, and they're my strongest allies, and they supported me, helped me get here, and I couldn't be here without them. We wouldn't be here without their help and their love.
Absolute facts.
Yes.
Guys, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for making this series. It really
thank
is so
you.
powerful. Thank you for all the honesty, and we thank you guys for showing up. Thank you to South by Southwest as well.
Thank you.